I'm going to do a Venn diagram thing, even though I'm not supposed to do the Venn diagram thing. Every time I do it, people complain and say nobody really knows what a Venn diagram is anyway. I get it. But it's useful here. It's a decent visual here, even though you can't see it. It still kind of works, and you can do it with your own hands. It is a Venn diagram of pressure, which really means, when I say pressure, it is the amount of media noise. Okay, and think of it that way. And there's a lot of media noise. In terms of pressure or media noise, I think the answer here is clear. I do. And I think a lot of you might agree, but it is an interesting way to look at the semifinal between Texas and Ohio State. Okay, who faces more pressure, more media noise? Take that Venn diagram and just have one big circle be the pressure in which one of the two, Steve Sarkisian or Ryan Day, takes up more of that space. Just use your Venn diagram. Go ahead right now. If you want to use a Big Chief tablet, number 2 pencil, that's cool too. So the noise around this game is huge. And when I say Texas v. Ohio State is the Yankees versus the Yankees, here's what I really mean by that. And this is not debatable, okay? And that is nobody spends more, nobody makes more, nobody invests more, no program is more bloated, okay? No program is more bloated. And no program is more all in professional college football than Texas and Ohio State. Other programs want to do those things. They would. And if they had the money, they would be acting like that. And a lot of SEC schools would love to do exactly and operate exactly how Ohio State and Texas operate, but they just don't have the resources to do it. These two programs live in a pool of financial excess when it comes to football. Okay? You can't even begin to appreciate your office, no matter how over the top your office is. It can't compare to these two football programs in the way they live in financial excess. It is the Taj Mahal of football. Got it? So neither program, just to be clear, and I think most people get this now, but neither program has any excuse ever to not be dominant in the sport, especially now that it is defined, the sport is defined by pay for play. The sport is now defined by spending. So more than ever before, neither one of them have an excuse not to be among the top 2, 4, 5, always. I mean, you really could make a case just on spending alone, the two of them should dominate the sport because nobody else plays a game like they do. But, all right, so you probably know some of that already. What's funny is that about this game is that Texas is not the story of the game. And that's funny because Texas is never not the story of the game. Texas never enters a game quietly and never enters a game as an afterthought. But that's what I'm talking about with the media noise, because it's not really about them at all, which you don't see very often, if ever, when it comes to Texas. The storyline and all the lines is about Ohio State, particularly when it comes to our Venn diagram about pressure, I think. And it's rare that you would ever say, gosh, Texas has no pressure. Oh my gosh, Texas is playing with house money. But that's kind of the setup here. Okay, now don't flip out. Please don't do this thing. Don't do the face painter thing. I'm not talking about whether or not, who's going to win. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not talking about fan passion. I'm not even saying that. What I'm talking about is the public and media perception of this game. And think about how the public and media pressure of this game, the noise, the media noise, has pivoted so quickly. That's what's amazing. Because I think they both have holes. I think both of them, not to get into nerdy football talk, but just a basic view of the two of them. I know people love to think that they're dissecting X's and O's. Most of that is just BS. People talk way too much. They act as if they know way too much. The fact of the matter is they both have glitchy issues because both of them haven't played a very tough schedule. And so when they do play somebody good, you find these glitchy moments. Both of them have that in them. And it doesn't show up very often because neither one of them played a very difficult schedule. So there are flaws here. There are weird, quirky flaws to both of them. There are periods where they kind of disappear from the game and go stupid, both of them. I'm talking about, isn't it interesting how quickly the pressure, the public noise, the media noise has pivoted all about Ohio State? I'm not saying it's wrong. There's no right or wrong to this. It's just an amazing perception right now, particularly when you think about it's involving Texas. When was the last time in terms of noise, the Texas talking about Texas wasn't the most noise? And it's not even, in my Venn diagram, they're barely showing up. So the pressure. And I'm not doing the football nerdy thing. That only really takes about 2 minutes when it comes to this game. Football's never complicated. It's really not ever complicated. But this is about public perception and these two, the public perception part is complicated. The two coaches here are complicated, and now with NFL jobs opening up, increasingly getting complicated. When we talk about pressure, it's now with all these NFL jobs opening up, it's taking on a new meaning. So both Texas and Ohio State have played their way into completely different narratives, right? Everybody is guilty. Typically, particularly when you're in the media space and a bunch of hot takes, everybody is guilty of bias of the past 2 weeks. We live in a window of a week or two. And these two teams have, oddly enough, played their way into the narrative that sits out there today. See if you agree with this. Texas, the narrative now, as we stand here today, the Texas narrative, because they're lucky to beat Arizona State, they were. Okay, don't spin it. They were. You can say, well, but, what do you mean, but? They went to double overtime against a pretty mediocre team with a bad defense. They were missing field goals and lucky to be where they are today. So, but that game with Arizona State, I think, even though they had periods where they were really good, and then as usual, both of these teams can do it. They have these periods where they disappear and aren't very good. They get away with it oftentimes, one, because they're both talented, and two, they don't play very tough schedules. So they're not exposed as quickly and as badly as they should. But Texas is now the underdog because of the way they sort of I'm not going to say snuck in, struggled with Arizona State, mostly outplayed by Arizona State, and had the biggest break of the college football playoff so far against Arizona State. And so they come into the game as almost an afterthought, which is amazing when you're talking about Texas. And you flip that around, and there's an Ohio State team that is left for dead after losing to a pretty bad Michigan team at home in an ugly game, played in the ugliest way, with a coach that is beyond and I hate the term hot seat, that is dead man walking, and that's Ryan Day. It's just a weird setup for the two of them. Okay, so what's the pressure? Which one of them faces more pressure? Which one of these coaches faces more pressure in terms of media noise and discussions? Because Texas sort of sneaking into the game, accused of not being very good here and there and getting lucky to get in. And then you've got Ohio State, who boat races Tennessee and Oregon. Remember, they have Oregon down 34-0. They had arguably the best 27 minutes of football you're going to see. You can't play the game any better than they did for 27 straight minutes against Oregon. They didn't do that for 27 minutes against UTSA. They did it for 27 minutes of perfect football against Oregon. And they're up 34-0. And now the pressure on Ryan Day and the pressure on Ohio State is white hot. I think it's far more than what Steve Sarkisian faces. Texas is hardly mentioned when you're talking about this game. Here goes a perfect example. ESPN is nonstop, which would make sense, has both games, both semifinals. I think this is Paul Feinbaum. They're debating this morning at some point exactly what I'm talking about right now. These two coaches come in this game in completely different ways with completely different narratives, and I think completely different levels of pressure.
Hey, Austin, Jeff Ward here, and I never thought I'd be in an accident and need a personal injury attorney. And then sure enough, less than a mile from my house, I was blindsided. I was injured. My world was turned completely upside down. I called DJC Law and their team took care of everything. I got the best result possible. Don't just take my word for it. They have over 1,000 five-star reviews. So if you're injured, call 512-888-9999 and get your justice at teamjustice.com.